A fountain has been dry for 11 years, the pennies are still in it, and somebody wished on every single one. It sits under a dusty skylight in a shuttered mall outside Cleveland, where the water went off on an ordinary Tuesday in 2015. The escalator behind it stopped mid-stair, its steel teeth climbing toward nothing. This was a machine once, a sealed building made to hold an entire town indoors. And what almost no one says out loud: it didn't die by accident, and it didn't die all at once. It died in stages, in an order so regular a person could mark a calendar by it. So why did America's malls fall in the very same sequence, town after town, and who tipped the first domino? There's a clause behind it, 3 words most shoppers never once heard, and nearly everyone who signed it had already forgotten it was there. Edina, Minnesota, October 1956, with the first snow already in the forecast. Inside a low brick box off France Avenue, the temperature held at a steady 72 degrees. There were orchids blooming beside a goldfish pond and a 21-foot cage of live birds hanging under a skylit court. The man who drew it was an Austrian émigré named Victor Gruen, who'd fled Vienna in 1938 with pocket change and an architecture degree. Southdale Center opened that fall with 72 stores on 2 levels, anchored by Dayton's and Donaldson's at either end. It was the first fully enclosed, climate-controlled shopping mall in the country, and Life magazine ran it as a marvel of the age. Tens of thousands of Minnesotans came through in the opening days, just to stand in 72 degrees while the wind howled outside. The Dayton family of Minneapolis had bankrolled the gamble, and it paid off inside a single season. Every mall that followed borrowed his grammar, whether the builders knew his name or not. The skylit court, the tiled concourse, the anchor at each far end, and at the heart of it, a fountain. Before Southdale, a shopping center had been a strip of storefronts open to the sleet and the sun. Gruen wanted the European town square instead, an indoor commons where a community could gather in any weather for free. The catch is what he believed he was building. He imagined apartments wrapped around the shops, with a school and a clinic beside them. He was sketching a real downtown, and developers kept the sealed box and threw all the rest away. There's even a name for the effect he built by accident, the Gruen transfer. It's the moment a disoriented shopper forgets the errand and drifts into the aisles. By the end of his life, Victor Gruen disowned it all, called the sprawl that copied him a bastard child, and sailed home to Vienna. Even Frank Lloyd Wright saw Southdale and grumbled it had all the evils of a village street and none of the charm. The historian M. Jeffrey Hardwick titled his biography of the architect Mall Maker, and the maker came to loathe what he'd made. And yet the machine in Edina worked better than anyone had dared to dream. The only question left was who'd pay to keep it running. The fountains never advertised this part. The big department store at the end of the corridor, a Sears or a JCPenney, barely paid rent at all. Often the anchor got its land nearly free or bought its own store outright, sometimes for a token dollar. The anchor had a different job entirely. It was the bait. A single Sears could pull 30,000 cars a week into a parking lot. Those shoppers walked the long way toward it, past the little stores lining the concourse. And the little stores paid the real rent. The shoe shop paid rent set high precisely because the anchor delivered the crowd. Many tenants handed over a slice of every sale on top, what the leases called percentage rent. So the whole building rested on one quiet bargain. The giants at the corners drew the people in for almost nothing. The small tenants in the middle covered the roof, the heat, and the fountain besides. Men like Edward de Bartolo built hundreds of these machines on exactly that math. So did James Rouse, who dreamed his malls were rebuilding the American town. The developer even signed away real control at the corners. The anchors held their own deeds and reciprocal agreements, nearly landlords in their own right, with a quiet veto over the floor plan. The strong paid nothing and owed nothing, while the weak paid everything and signed their name to the guarantee. And those leases ran 10 or 20 years, long enough to feel eternal. A young couple would sign for a card shop, shake hands, and never once picture the anchor going dark. So what happens to the middle if a corner ever goes dark? The answer already sat right there in the lease, and most of them never read it. Hold that thought. By the early 1980s, the machine had multiplied clear across the country. By most counts, more than 2,000 enclosed malls were running in the United States at the peak. A new one opened, on average, every few weeks. And for a whole generation of American towns, the mall quietly became the living room. It's where a 14-year-old got dropped off on a Saturday morning with a $5 bill and no way to phone home. It's where the retired men walked their laps at dawn before the gates rolled up. There was the food court steam and the cinnamon off the roll counter, the Orange Julius, the Sam Goody, the Walden Books with its narrow carpeted aisles. A girl bought her first prom dress here, and a boy bought his first record 2 doors down. The mall kept the town's calendar one season at a time, and the fountain in the center caught the coins. The critic Alexandra Lang later wrote a history of the whole institution and titled it after the words everybody once said, "Meet me by the fountain," because that's where a town met, by the water. A grandfather would hand a child a penny at the rail, fold the small fingers around it, and nod at the surface. Make a wish, don't tell. The penny went in, the wish stayed secret, and the coin joined 10,000 others, glinting under the lights. Nobody called it ritual, and yet that's exactly what it was, the closest thing a lot of suburbs ever had to a public square. What lingers looking back is how permanent it all felt. It wasn't, and the reason was already written down, 3 words deep, in a document nobody in the food court had ever seen. Which 3 words emptied the mall? Now the easy answer is a name everybody already knows: Amazon. The story goes that the internet arrived, people started shopping from the couch, and the malls simply starved. It's a clean story, and it's also mostly wrong about the timing. Malls were already dying through the 1990s and the early 2000s, back when online shopping was a rounding error in retail. Whole enclosed malls went dark before a single prime van existed, so something else set the order, something inside the building, and here it is. The 3 words are these: the co-tenancy clause. The co-tenancy clause was a private contract term written into the small tenant's own leases with no statute behind it anywhere. Nobody ever voted it in, and most shoppers never once learned its name. In plain language, it reads like a trapdoor. Here's what the clause says. If the anchor goes dark, the small tenant may cut its rent or hand back the keys with the lease gone void. Some versions set a hard number instead. If occupancy slipped below, say, 70%, the clause tripped on its own. Read that twice because the whole collapse lives inside it. The mall's income depended on small tenants paying high rent, and their duty to pay depended on the anchors staying lit. The anchor turned out to be more than the bait. It was the load-bearing wall. Pull one giant out of one corner, and the clause let a dozen small shops lower their rent or leave legally and instantly. Now, the smartest objection is a fair one. Surely a landlord would just refill the anchor and stop the bleeding. But a store of 200,000 feet takes years to relet, if it ever relets at all. By then, the clause has already emptied the shops that paid the bills. Picture a card shop paying $8,000 a month. The anchor closes, the clause trips, and by the next invoice, that same shop pays half, or nothing at all. So who on earth would write such a thing? A leasing lawyer in the boom years, shielding his small client from a landlord's broken promise. It was meant as a shield. Stacked 1,000 leases deep, it became a fuse. The wound was self-inflicted, and it was signed in good faith. And this is where the whole story turns, because the real cause was structural, and it was old. The mall carried its own ending inside the contract it signed on opening day, buried on page 40 of the 1974 fine print. The internet showed up decades later and took the blame, but by then, the trapdoor had already sprung. Every small tenant in America had signed a clause that promised, in effect, when the giant falls, I get to run. Most of them had long since forgotten they'd ever signed it, until the day a giant actually fell. When does the first anchor go dark? For a long time, the giants looked like they could never fall. Sears was the everything store, decades before that phrase belonged to anyone else. A farmer 100 years ago could order an entire house from the Sears catalog. The lumber and the nails arrived by rail with the blueprints, and by some counts, the company shipped tens of thousands of those kit homes. Its founder was a railway agent named Richard Warren Sears, who'd started by selling watches down a Minnesota train line in the 1880s. Sears, Roebuck and Company dated to 1893, and its catalog became a kind of national scripture. It ran 1,000 pages and landed on kitchen tables for a century. By the 1970s, Sears sold Craftsman tools and Kenmore washers, wrote Allstate Insurance, and raised the tallest building on earth over Chicago. That tower topped out in 1973 at 1,450 feet, and it held the world record for a generation. In 1985, the company even launched the Discover Card, certain it could bank the country the way it had furnished it. What's striking is how quietly the giant thinned. There was no single crash, only a store closing here and a catalog folding there, 100 small retreats that never made the news. The company finally retired the big book in 1993. Kmart was the discount giant that should have been safe. Its first store opened in Garden City, Michigan in 1962, spun from the old Kresge dime store chain. But sharper discounters underpriced it, and in 2005, the financier Eddie Lampert merged Kmart and Sears into a single holding company. The deal was sold as a rescue, and it bought time and little else. Then the reckoning arrived with a precise date on it. On October 15, 2018, Sears Holdings filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, and Eddie Lampert stepped down as chief executive that same day. The everything store, the one that once mailed whole houses to the prairie, had finally run out of road. Somewhere in a mall outside Cleveland, and 1,000 malls just like it, an anchor went dark. And the clause on page 40 woke up. The second giant fell a year and a half later. James Cash Penny had opened his first dry goods store in Kemmerer, Wyoming in 1902 and named it the Golden Rule. He built the chain on a simple creed that a fair deal today brought the customer back tomorrow. At its peak, it ran well over 1,000 stores with a catalog that rivaled the Sears book on the same kitchen tables. Then, in May of 2020, with the whole country shut indoors, JCPenney filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in a Texas courtroom. And here's where the clause stops being theory and becomes a stampede. When an anchor that size goes dark, the co-tenancy trapdoor opens across the entire building at once. The nail salon reads its lease and cuts its rent, and the card shop reads its lease and simply leaves. It happens fast, the same week, sometimes the very day the news breaks. They'd all signed the identical clause, and every copy had been waiting on the identical trigger. A landlord could lose one anchor, and inside a month, watch a third of the concourse invoke a rent cut or walk out the door. This is exactly what the easy Amazon story misses. The internet chips away at sales slowly from the outside, while the co-tenancy clause pulls the load-bearing wall out instantly from the inside. For the small tenant, the clause was a mercy, an honest exit from a sinking ship. For the town, that same mercy was the sound of the ship going down. A leasing agent could watch a wing empty in a week, holding a contract that worked exactly as written. Nobody had broken a single rule, and that was the terrible part. Within months, a pair of mall landlords bought the JCPenney brand out of bankruptcy, more to save their own buildings than the stores. They rescued the anchor to keep their own co-tenancy clauses from firing. Once that stampede starts, the death runs in a sequence, and it's nearly the same sequence every single time. Stage 1 always begins at a single storefront, the anchor gate. It's the wide steel grate at the end of the wing, and one morning, it just doesn't roll up. A paper sign goes on the glass, and the letters are always a little too small for the size of the loss. For a while, almost nothing looks wrong because the other stores are still open and the lights are still on. And yet the current has already changed because those 30,000 cars a week came for the anchor. The corridor that led to the dead giant empties first, its foot traffic dropping by half, then by far more. One by one, the stores closest to the gate flip their signs and clear their shelves. The empty anchor even earns a name in the trade: a ghost box. 200,000 square feet of dark wired for a store that isn't coming back. Security thins next, one guard walking a loop the size of a small airport. A dark anchor becomes a dark wing, and a dark wing becomes a dead end. So management does the thing that always comes next. They close that hallway off for renovations that somehow never arrive. A chain gets strung across a corridor, and butcher paper gets taped over a storefront window. The mall begins amputating itself to survive, one limb at a time. Stage 1 has a sound as well, or rather the very beginning of a silence, because the next thing the building loses is its noise. Stage 2 is when the sound goes. A healthy mall roars softly, a wash of footsteps and music, and 1,000 overlapping voices off the tile. As the stores thin, that wash drains away, and once half the concourse is papered over, a person can hear their own shoes. And that's when the food court starts to die. The food court was always the last campfire, and it runs on sheer volume. A pretzel stand needs a river of people rather than a trickle. The national chains pull out first because a corporation reads a foot traffic report and doesn't grow sentimental. The heating gets dialed back, and the lights over the empty tables go off in sections to trim the power bill. The muzak is usually the last voice to go when someone cancels the music service and the ceiling speakers fall silent. For good. That silence is the truest sound a dying mall makes. Then comes stage 3, the quietest cut of them all. Somebody in an office finally does the math on the fountain, the pumps, the water, the chemicals, and a contract nobody wants to sign again. So one Tuesday, with no ceremony at all, the water gets shut off. The jets stop, and the surface goes flat, then filmy, and finally dry. And the pennies are still down there, thousands of them, no longer under any water. Nobody scoops them out, and somehow that's the detail that stays with people. A wish cost a penny, and the town walked out and left every last one behind. The fountain going dark is how a person knows the building has entered its final stage. Which brings up the question anyone who grew up inside, one ends up asking. Stage 4 is the long twilight. The mall isn't dead, but it's plainly dying, and everyone walking through knows it. A few stubborn tenants hang on, a phone repair kiosk here, a barber there, a church renting the old shoe store on Sundays. The lights run on a timer, and weeds push up through the seams of the parking lot. And this is where the dossier becomes useful. Read enough dead malls and they read like case files, the same evidence filed in the same order. A dark anchor, then a closed wing, then a thinning food court, then a dry fountain. Line those 4 against any mall a person half remembers, and the death becomes datable, almost to the year. The planners even have a cold word for what's left, a gray field, neither living retail nor honest ruin. And the loss never stops at the doors. A dying mall was often a town's single largest taxpayer, and its assessed value falls like a stone. The schools feel it, and the county roads feel it. Some towns end up taking the dead mall onto the city's own books just to level it, purchasing the corpse of their own downtown. By most counts, America has already lost well over 1,000 of its enclosed malls. A few hundred healthy ones remain, mostly in the wealthy suburbs. But for every mall still bright, there's another in stage 4 right now, with one security guard and a food court of 1. Almost everyone alive today has one they can name, and statistically, it's already somewhere on that sequence. And when the last store finally goes, the building itself doesn't vanish. It becomes something else entirely, something almost no one sees coming. Here's what becomes of the corpse. The enclosed mall is, underneath the fountains, just a very large box beside a very large parking lot. And that turns out to be an extraordinarily useful thing to own. Some become churches, and the sanctuary rises where the men's department used to stand. Some become medical, as dialysis clinics move into the storefronts, and the concourse fills with waiting room chairs. Others go civic, community colleges, and county offices, and a few string pickleball courts under the old skylights. Others fill with self-storage, the concourse lined with orange roll-up doors where the window displays once glowed. And some, in the strangest turn of all, go back to being warehouses. On the ground where Randall Park Mall once stood in Ohio, Amazon built a fulfillment center. That mall was once advertised as one of the largest on Earth, and the warehouse rose on the very same footprint. Delivery vans now idle where the family cars once parked. Sit with that trade for a second. The mall existed to gather a town into a single warm room and sell to it, face to face. The warehouse exists to scatter that same town into 10,000 doorstep deliveries. The same footprint that once drew the town together now ships the packages that emptied it. A place built to make people stay had become a place built to make them leave. The building kept standing. It simply changed sides and went quietly to work for the very thing that hollowed it out, which leaves one small stubborn question waiting at the dry fountain. Return for a moment to the fountain outside Cleveland, dry for 11 years now. The anchors are gone, and the food court is a grid of bolt holes in the tile. The pennies are still on the bottom, gone green, catching a little light from the one skylight nobody has cleaned. Nobody guards them now, and a person could walk in and scoop up 40 years of wishes in a single afternoon. And yet nobody does. Somehow the coins stay exactly where the town left them. No one wants to be the person who cashes out a stranger's wish. And what changed hands here was simple. What got traded was the last warm room a whole town could share without paying to sit down. A generation was handed a public square by accident in the shape of a shopping mall, and it lasted about 50 years. Then a clause it never read slid the wall out from under it. Here's the truth about a place like that. It leaves the way a name leaves a tongue. Slowly, then all at once. The forgetting is the real ending, and it arrives the afternoon nobody in town remembers the fountain ever ran at all. The last scene plays out the way it always does. A grandfather brings a grandchild to see the mall he grew up in before the developers finish it off for good. He walks her to the dry fountain out of habit and reaches into his pocket for a penny, the way his own father once did. There's no water left to throw it into, so he presses the penny into her palm anyway. He folds her small fingers over it and tells her to make a wish and to keep it. She doesn't quite understand, but she keeps the penny. Somebody kept those pennies for 40 years, long after the water quit. So this channel keeps the rooms. Subscribe, and the next vanished place gets remembered before it's gone. The fountain never got its water back, but somebody kept the pennies, because a wish once made doesn't know the building is gone.